Welcome back to another episode of Close to Broke. My name is Kieran, and today it's pretty bright out, and you might be asking, how is this possible? It is because we got an early session in today. Well, we're gonna get an early session. We'll happen in now. Happy to have you guys back. Really happy we got to sit down and have that heart-to-heart at the end of last episode. You guys seem to really enjoy that. This week has been quite the roller coaster of emotions, but right now we're gonna quickly hop into a session. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys as always. Thank you so much for continuing to support and follow the videos. Let's hop into the commerce, get our seat, get our chips, and crush some souls. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you all dearly. Let's hop into today's episode. Just like that, we find ourselves in the Commerce 510 game. As you guys have been seeing, this is where I'm most comfortable, I think. This is where I run the best, probably. Maybe not, who knows, and we're on for $1,500 to get things going. We find ourselves in the very first hand of the session, looking down at King 10 offsuit. We go and raise it to $35. The big blind makes a call here, and the flop comes 9-5-3 with a heart and 2 diamonds. The action checks over to me. I'm going to go ahead and check this back here, considering we do have King High. It can be good at some frequency of the time, and I think that my opponent's going to be crushing this board a little more often than I am, so I'm going to play this a little cautiously. The turn card comes the Queen of Spades. With the action now back onto me, it's a good idea to start betting for some equity denial, as well as the opportunity to build a pot if we happen to hit any of our outs on the river. We do improve to a gut shot to add some equity to our hand. But again, sometimes King High can be good, and it's probably a good idea to start denying some equity against those hands. I make it $20. After a brief moment, he decides to make the call, and we're going off to a river that comes the Jack of Clubs. Bing, bang, bomb. We ended up making the nuts here on the river somehow with the runner gut shot for a gut shot. My opponent ends up checking it over to me once again. At this point, I think it's best that I start betting for value and a pretty bigger sizing, I think, or a larger sizing if that's better English. I make it $75 into around $85 or $90 pot.
I'm pretty positive.
Must be strong, huh? I had you.
I think
prior to
I could have any hand and it'd probably be better than yours. I think you have like 10-9, I guess. If you have anything that's worth even thinking about.
That's the best he's putting on?
Yeah, because I thought he didn't have anything, but then he said, then he didn't fold right away, and I was like, oh fuck. Then maybe he has like a 9. He doesn't have a queen. There's no way. No way, Jose.
Well, I have better than
10-9. Jack 10.
After a bit of tanking, my opponent says he folds. There is some pretty decent table talk, as you guys heard from there, but unfortunately, my opponent ends up folding, and he shows the King of Hearts, I believe. In this following hand, we're in a very interesting situation as we have continued the festivities by adding a $20 blind raise mandatory in this game. Again, it's not great because here at the Commerce Casino there is no straddle, at least not in the 510 game or anything lower than that. So we're making it $20 blind here every single hand. Not me, but the table is. Anyways, with a blind straddle on, the early position decides to limp here. Small blind was a pretty decent, competent player, decides to isolate the limper to $110. We look down at King 7 offsuit. This is a pretty shitty hand, but if you're never going to be bluffing here, you're probably not bluffing enough. And like I said, a face card, yeah, that's good enough for me to just throw a little bit of a feeler bet out there. I 3-bet to $270, considering we are in position. We don't have to go massive here. 2.5x or 2.7x is what I'm trying to do here. Works out okay. And luckily, I didn't put $300 or more in there, because after a brief moment of pause, a subscriber of the vlog decides to 4-bet jam $800. With the action being folded back to me. I'm never going to be given action here with King High, King 7 High specifically. I end up making the pretty easy lay down, and our opponent does not show, but he wanted to be in the vlog, so I added this hand in there. Congratulations to you, sir. You caught me when I was bluffing. You caught me with my pants down. And just like that, we end up losing a pretty sizable pot in reality for the size of this game. You know, but it is what it is. 30 big blinds. We'll never see them again. In this following hand here, I find myself under the straddle or the blind raise with 7-4 suited here. Not a great hand, but we're playing 6-hand at this point, so I think it's best I take advantage of that by raising a little bit on the wider side with these suited 2-3 gappers or whatever the heck this is. I end up making it $60 to go. The cutoff and the small blind make the call, and we're going off to a flop that comes, you know, pretty decent for our hand, as it comes Queen, Jack, Deuce with 2 spades and a diamond. With the action focused on me at this point after the small blind checks, I end up throwing out a c-bet of $100 here. Don't need to be going very massive. Only the small blind makes a call, which is a little wary. The turn card comes a 10 of clubs. Unfortunate now here that I don't get there with my flush. The opponent checking over to me is one sign of positivity. If he doesn't check it over to me, I'd like to continue betting here, as that I can easily have ace king here. I can definitely have the 2-pair combinations, as well as all the sets, as well as all the random flush draws and combo draws. I end up making $375, hoping and praying for a fold. And if not, if we're going to get called, we're going to need to get there. After a brief moment, my opponent does in fact make the call for 375 buckaroonies. We're going off to a river that comes a king. This doesn't change much besides the simple fact that there is now a 4-liner out there. Any ace does make a straight here. The interesting thing, in my opinion, is it's kind of hard for my opponent to have an ace here. Unless he has specifically ace jack, I just don't think that any other combination of aces that exist really makes sense to get on here on this river. Unless, of course, our opponent has a suited ace 5 of spades, ace 10 of spades, I guess something like that. But not a whole lot of aces on this river in his range, or at least I perceive that. The only unfortunate thing here is that our opponent decides to lead out for 400 bucks. That's not great, not even in the slightest of margins. It's unfortunate. I'm going to have to make the fold here. We're just not deep enough for me to, be able to make any massive plays. And beyond that, I just don't think my opponent's in the mood to make any big folds. If he happens to have a hand like 2-pair or a set, there's a good chance that my opponent's not folding anyways. So I end up making the fold here. Like I said, pretty easy, fairly pedestrian fold here with 7 high. But, maybe we got lucky and a spade didn't come. Maybe he had a bigger flush draw himself. Things have progressively gotten worse here. Not much is going in my favor, but it's never stopped me before. I'm feeling like a comeback is on the horizon. And there's 4 limps as it gets to me in the big blind. We look down at the old king 10 offsuit. I'm going to go ahead and isolate here to these 4 limpers to 150 bucks. The straddle makes the call. The middle position limper makes a call. We're going off 3 ways to a flop that comes king 4-3, all hearts. We flop ourselves top pair as well as a flush draw. I'm going to go ahead and bet here for $200, betting a little bit on the larger side considering this board is super wet. I'd like to charge all the better flush draws as well as get some other hands to overreact by raising or whatever the case may be. It's time for me to get some value. Seems like those plans are going off the rails, not because they're folding, but because my opponents are raising. The straddler decides to raise to 500 bucks. The action folds back over to me. He's playing around $1,400 to start this hand here, to start this flop. I end up just jamming it all in here. At the time, what I'm thinking is my opponent's just going to be incapable of folding a flush draw that's significantly better. Or if my opponent happens to have, a flop set or something like that, I'm still drawing fairly live here. I might as well get it all in here in the middle and see all the runouts. I jam for $1,400 total. My opponent makes a call for 900 more. My opponent pretty quickly announces that he has a set. That is not the greatest of news, but it's impossible for me to draw dead here as there is all hearts on this flop. The thing that I was not expecting to see was pocket kings. My opponent in the straddle had pocket kings and did not decide to raise it here or 3-bet to save me all this money pre-flop. Unfortunate for us, we're going to need to catch some luck here. I'm going to ask you guys one time and one time only to do me the massive favor by clicking the like button in 3 seconds for some run good. 3, 2, 1. The turn comes a 5 of spades and the river comes a beautiful red 5 of diamonds. Unfortunate for us as we do not improve to a flush. My opponent improves to a boat, which happens to be overkill, and a massive pot is going in the direction of my neighbor here to the left. Unfortunate for us, we're not able to take any money out of this gentleman's stack. In fact, he's taking all of the money out of my stack, and just like that, we find ourselves into this game for 3,500 bucks. Things are not going as planned. And at this point, feeling a little grim. In this following hand, yet again, we find ourselves in a really interesting spot against the exact same opponent. I find myself in middle position with 7-4 spades. I don't know what the heck it is with these suited random gappers, but I like them for some reason. I raised to 60 bucks, middle position, late position, and the small blind make the call. We're going way too many ways to a flop that comes 4-3 deuce, all diamonds. Yet again, a monotone flop against this specific player and some other guests in the hand. And yet again, we flopped a pretty reasonable little holding here. With the action checking over to me, I once again c-bet for $100. The gentleman to my direct left decides to make the raise, though, to $300. Everyone else folds, and yet again, we find ourselves against this exact gentleman on a monotone board flop with a reasonable holding. I can't fold just yet, so I make the call for $300. We're going off to a turn card that comes an ace of clubs. I decide to check it over to him. He has to see my stack. After a brief moment, he ends up checking it through. That makes me feel a little better. Maybe I have the best hand, or maybe he has an ace and is playing some pot control here. Either way, we go off to a river that comes a deuce of spades. I end up checking it over to my opponent. And at this point, in hindsight, I think that adding a little bit of a blocker bet might be a decent play here. I'm never comfortable calling a larger bet, or I don't feel good about it. If I throw out a bet of like 50 bucks or something like that, and my opponent raises, this is an exact example where I think that works out and I can get away from my hand fairly easily. I don't know if my opponent is strong enough or capable enough of deciding to use that hand as a bluff raise or whatever the heck he's doing. So this is where I think I really hate the play in this hand. The blocker bet was invented and used for specific instances like such. Anyways, after checking, my opponent thinks about it for some time before deciding to bet $400. The reason I find myself in the tank here is for a couple things. One, there's a 4 to a straight out there, so I just don't know what hands my opponent can have that he decides to raise the flop with, unless it's like 5-6 without a diamond. I don't think he can be value betting an ace on the river here, and it's less likely for my opponent to have a boat because there's another deuce out there and I'm holding a 4. So he'd have to have specifically a hand like 3s, I think, to go for value as a boat, and I just don't feel like a flush that flops it is going to be checking back the turn here. It's just such a good idea to bet on that turn. But again, I just don't know. I don't perceive this gentleman to be a pro by any means, so it's just hard to give him credit of playing things specifically like I might or a professional might. All that being said, after quite some tanking, I ask a couple of questions. My opponent does a good job of not giving me too much before eventually I throw in the call as curiosity gets the best of me. My opponent shows 9-10 of diamonds here, so outstanding. Checked on the turn by him. Very surprised to see him check the turn with a pretty vulnerable hand like that. Whatever the case may be, he ended up getting the maximum value from me. I just can only tip my hat to him and let him know that this time around, he's got the best of me, and there's no disputing that. In the final hand of the session, we've got a pretty interesting one to go over as we look down at Queen 10 offsuit here for middle position. I go and raise to $80, considering there is a post behind me. That gentleman decides to fold. The small blind and the big blind both make the call. The blind raiser folds. We're going off to a flop that is not very favorable for us at all, as it comes ace jack 6 with 2 diamonds. We don't have a diamond in our hand, but we do flop a gut shot and should in some frequencies have a reasonable range advantage here. The small blind does check, but the big blind decides to bet out $100. Don't know what the hell he's repping here. He's donk-led a ton of times today and just got the best of me. I decide to peel one off here and make the call. We're going off to a turn card that comes a 7 of clubs. Doesn't change anything to the board texture, and when he decides to jam it all in here for $500, having me covered at this point, I end up making the fold. Can never call with just a gut shot. And just like that, this session, or at least this version of today's session, has come to an end. To be quite honest, today's session has not gone in my favor. I'm feeling a little deflated here, but that's never stopped me before, so it better not stop you guys now. Let's throw it over to me at this end of session or mid-session update to give you guys a pretty important breakdown of what's expected to come in the following episode.
Alrighty, folks. Sorry for the short session, but the reason I don't want to put this in the same episode is because we're playing higher stakes. We just saw that a seat was open and a game is running shorthanded for 2040. So I'm going to go hop over to that. We're down piles in through whatever this was, 5-10 game. The game was pretty bad, and to be honest, I've been running pretty bad. I'm not really upset with how I played out, I don't think. I feel good, though. I had a little quesadilla action. Gonna hop into that. Let's see if we do any better. Please come back to watch the second part of this episode on Monday. It's gonna be a really good time. I can promise you that much. Thank you guys, as always, for coming through. I appreciate you guys from the bottom of my heart. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Remember, $2,500 we're giving away if we get to 25K subs by June 10th. Appreciate you guys always. Have a wonderful day. Let's hop into this next episode, though. I'll see you guys on Monday.